Hey, Mark.
Hey, brother.
Good to see you, man. So
Likewise.
you and I have been talking about the world that we're living in for a long time now, right? You and I have been hanging out together for over 25 years, and we've seen a lot of stuff over the course of our career, right? Wars, pandemic, financial turmoil, housing collapse, dot-com bubble burst, all kinds of new technologies come in. And I feel like every day when I read the news, especially the business news, kind of where politics and business intersect,
Mm,
I keep thinking to myself, man, it's got to really suck to be a founder today because there are so many crazy signals crossing your desk every day. How do you make sense out of what to listen to, what to ignore, what signal, what's noise? So I wanted to have this conversation today and kind of let's start at like the stratospheric level. If you're a founder of a business today, maybe you're bootstrapped, maybe you've taken other people's money and you're in growth mode. Let's just generally say growth mode. What should I be thinking about? What should I be at a minimum every day waking up and spending some time thinking about and actively doing to move my business forward in this, let's just say, chaotic environment we find ourselves in right now?
great question. So the way I'd like to answer that question and the way I'd like to talk about that is by unpacking what we know most founders think about today. Like from the time they wake up, right, till the time they go to bed. And the fact that you and I have been founders multiple times helps, right? Because we can empathize and we can plug into that mindset because we've lived it for years. But what we know is that most founders wake up thinking about three things: cash flow, right? So do I have capital in the bank, right? Where am I at from my own personal cash flow, right? Because I'm typically financing the business, and unless I've got outside investors, and then even then I'm on the hook, right? So there's a vig. I need to be able to, right, create a return for my investors, and there's a lot of pressure around that. And so it's, where am I at with cash flow? Where am I at with customers, right? Do I have enough customers? Are my customers happy? Are they paying? Am I being stretched out? I.e., goes to cash flow, right? So customers, cash flow, and then employees. Do I have the staff? Do I have the team, right? Do I have issues on my team? What's the culture like? And so are my employees showing up? And if they're showing up, are they actually performing? And so typically, like right off the bat, you roll out of bed, right? Most founders are like, okay, where am I at from cash perspective? What do I need to do in terms of helping my customers? And then, where am I at from my leads? Where are my lead people? So do I need to do anything for my people? How can I support my team? Right, et cetera. And oftentimes those are the things that they're thinking about. Now, the backdrop is, what's home life like, right? Or do you have a solid marriage, right? And if you're not married, right, what's your home life like? What are your habits like? Like, is home fortress of solitude for you? Is it chaotic? Do you have young children? Or are you going through issues with family? Seasons of life. Life is going to life, right? So, so if you're dealing with that as well, then most founders are consumed with that, because oftentimes being a leader and being a founder is a really lonely thing, right? And people can say, and you've heard people say, "Hey, it's lonely at the top, or it's lonely being a leader." I love John Maxwell's perspective on this, by the way, which he says, if you're lonely as a leader, you're doing leadership wrong.
Exactly right.
Right, right. And so, like, I love that mindset, because what he's really saying is, if you're not leaning into your people, or if you're not reading people in, like if you're not gathering the flock and like pulling people into your mindset, your thought process, right? Your vision, your mission, right? If all you have, if the only person that you have to speak about or speak with is yourself in the mirror, that's a really lonely place to be. So the recommendation is to like flip that thinking, like rethink how you're approaching leadership, and rethink what you're focusing your time on. And so that's typically what I hear, and what I see when I work with founders, when I work with CEOs, is those are really the thoughts that they're sitting in every day. And every once in a while, right, they'll be thinking AI, hottest topic ever, right? I mean, that's all anybody wants to talk about. Should I be doing things with AI, or how could I be leveraging AI, right? That's the new thing. And it has been for years, candidly. What I find is, if there is strategic planning going on, or futuristic planning, and modeling. It's happening and occurring in an ad hoc manner, and there's not a lot of focus and intentionality to that. There's more focus and intentionality on the three things that we talked about versus future state. And I think the biggest danger that founders and CEOs and corporations, corporate executives are faced with today is the pace of change and disruption is accelerating. It's accelerating significantly, and it's much faster than I think anybody thought it was going to be. And what I mean by that is just kind of leaning into this AI topic is, and by the way, there are a lot of experts, there are a lot of financial experts, there are a lot of technology experts, industry experts that are saying the same things. But here's like the dynamic part of this is AI and the platforms and the technologies and the underlying infrastructure today, what it has done, and it has abstracted and replaced cognitive capability, not just function. It's not just, hey, I can automate this function. I can automate research. I can automate, right? It's, it has automated cognitive capability.
So you're saying it's making us dumber, less capable.
Well, it depends on how you lean into that, right? So this is mindset, like shifting things. If you follow that out, what that means, and you and I have personally experienced this recently with software, right? Because we're both creators, right? So, but what we know is that that cognitive process for defining requirements, scoping requirements, prioritizing use case, right? In a traditional software requirements definition process. We know that process cold because we've been doing it for decades. What we also know is the amount of lift and energy it takes to actually go through that process before you start creating architecture, software architecture, and then writing code, and then testing that code, right? And then launching something commercial or something that's an MVP, right? You and I have both experienced that
Many
something that
times.
takes thousands of man hours
Yeah,
can now be done in 30 minutes.
that is the truth.
Right, right. So we've witnessed that. That's not going to stop with software. It's the, right, like there are cognitive. Again, the reason I say this is because once you uncouple cognitive capacity and capability from human, and now it can actually run and operate, you have to rethink how your business is architected. You
So you're
have.
so just to be clear, you're not necessarily saying it's always a net negative to
Mm-mm.
shift where that cognitive capability is actually being applied. It used to be all 100% human, right? And to the extent that a machine or a program could help us, we would utilize it, but it was really just helping us go faster in a particular task, right? Or
Right.
get a more predictable outcome. But today, we can start that entire process of actually coding or creating at the ideation phase. We don't have to go through a big requirement. So essentially, the tooling now allows us to skip steps. And is that skipping of steps valuable, or is it
Well,
going to
I
break
think.
things?
To your point, I think the answer is it's going to do both, right? So if you think about this from a business model perspective, the time and the effort it would typically take to do market research, market analysis, A/B testing, the time and effort it would take to actually create a business plan, old school like we used to do, 3 to 5 year business plan. That's hundreds and hundreds of hours,
Oh, yeah.
if not thousands of hours, if you're doing market research, right? And market testing can all be done in 30 to 40 minutes. Okay. So think about that. As a business owner, how does that change the way that you architect and design your business? How does that change the way that you architect and design product? How does that change the way that you do A/B testing with your product or service in the market? How should that change? So again, I think like the biggest challenge that founders and owners and CEOs are not taking enough time to be deliberate and to be focused on the next build of their businesses. What does Aspire 2.0 look like? What does ABC 2.0 look like? And right, we kind of laugh and we kind of joke around about this because as consultants at the board level, we do this a lot. But it's like my favorite challenge to a board and to a leadership team or to an ownership group is if you were going to design a competitor that would kill your company the way that it exists today, what would that design of that business look like? Now, go away and design that business and come back and talk to me back. And I always challenge them and ask, why the heck aren't you doing that already? Well, and then the excuses start, right? Or it's, and
And they're
some,
always well rehearsed. Have you noticed that?
and sometimes they're not, it's not just excuses, it's the reality that they're communicating. It's the fact that they have technical debt. It's the fact that they have financial debt. It's the fact that they have organizational debt, right? Executive debt. It's the fact that they're trapped in a legacy modality of how they've architected and built a business that they've been running for 15 to 20 years. And what I'm seeing play out in the marketplace in a very high velocity manner is that the organizations that are stuck in a legacy modality will be replaced or dead in 2 to 3 years because of the massive advancements that are going on. So, in this typical B school thesis stuff, right? But if you look at the Industrial Revolution, you look at the steam engine, right? And you look at the manufacturing Industrial Revolution, like if you look at all of these advances, all of the legacy companies that tried to hold on for dear life of their old business models died if they didn't reinvent themselves. The pandemic, the interesting thing about the pandemic, even though it was so horrible globally, what we recognized and the lesson that came out of that was if you can pivot, you can survive.
Absolutely.
That was the litmus test. Companies that pivoted and could shift didn't just survive, they thrived. And
Well, I
so
mean, they applied that old adage from the military, right? Adapt, overcome, improvise, adapt, and overcome, right? They
that's right.
built their businesses, and more importantly, the leadership had a mindset where we're not going to let this thing pick us off base.
That's
We can
right.
get through this, and we've got ideas on how we can do that. Maybe they've even practiced them. I know I was in a company where, and I think most people experience this, and this is why I love the pandemic, and it's going to provide the next 100 years of B school thesis
Yep.
fertile ground. One of the things that I came away, and it ended up being in our book featured prominently, is this idea that if you haven't thought through what might happen and have a plan, at least a nominal plan for how you would react when certain things are true, you're going to be left flat footed and you're going to be scrambling. And it's going to be twice as hard and 3 times as expensive to meet the challenge of the moment. But if you plan, if you just think through a little bit, what might happen if this happens out, in the macro economy, if this happens, like, capital becomes unavailable to us.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do?
Right.
And having a contingency and actually thinking through with your leadership team, what will we do in the face of that? So I think you're right. I think the pandemic pointed out to every board, every leader, every investor that there are areas of our business where we have massive blind spots. We are not prepared for a bad thing to happen. And unfortunately, here we are 5 years later, and I think most companies are still in that exact same place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, they all know what to do if a pandemic hits again, right? We've all got a playbook for that.
Right.
But, what if the, interest rate goes up 3 clicks?
Right.
Then what?
Well, and there's some interesting theories and speculation and opinions that are going on around the fact that the way the free market works today is not the way the free market's going to work moving forward. Meaning, it's going to be much more interconnected with governance and regulation and government involvement versus letting the market play out. And there are really strong feelings on all sides, right, of the table around that, but you can't argue with the facts. Meaning, even if you're an independent or libertarian, and I'm not trying to get political, right, but I'm just like, I'm an independent, but I have a lot of libertarian friends, right, and I have a lot of friends on all sides of the aisle. But here's the reality. Like, if you look at what the government's doing and what the government's regulating and what the government is investing in, and then look at those organizations, what's happening? The amount of money and resources are being blown out in those organizations, right? That administration is focused on and is investing in. They're getting resource, they're getting capital, right? The money in the markets are moving in those directions. Some of the analysts and some of the researchers that I follow months ago were saying we're going to see this massive shift in the markets, in the money markets, right? And in the stock markets, they're going to move from the NVIDIAs, the AMDs, the Intels. You're going to see this fundamental shift of money, and you're going to see this fundamental shift out of SaaS. Well, what have we seen? Like, this is happening, right? This
And
is
it's happening
why.
faster than anybody predicted.
That's my point. My point is that the amount of change and redirection of money and resource, which affects every business, doesn't matter if you're in technology or not, right? The fact is the change, the redirection of money and resource is something to watch and be really cautious of, because that sets the tone for your business. I don't care if you're in manufacturing, I don't care if you're in CPG, consumer packaged goods, I don't care if you're selling business to consumer or business to business. Like, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. The challenges that we see, excuse me, in the MSP, MSSP, SaaS segments is, and in the hardware, software segments, is all of those movements that I just talked about have happened 90 days. And the
And nobody
market,
has a playbook for a 90-day change. Nobody.
right. So to your point and to your example earlier, what do you do when capital dries up? What do you do when hardware dries up? Like, we're seeing this, right? With NAND,
Sure.
we're seeing this with right memory, and you're gonna see this with other components. Now, we lived through this in the 90s. Us gray hairs, we saw this happen in the 90s, and then we saw
Sure
this
did.
happen right in the in the
Yeah, when client server became a
2010.
thing, hardware constraints were everywhere. And then when SaaS and cloud hit, again, same kind of thing till people built enough data centers to meet the demand, right? And we're in that exact same moment now, only this time it cuts across all the different, what I'll call supply silos of the tech industry, right? It's not
Right,
just compute, right? Compute's a big problem right now, especially because of
right.
AI. But now we have a power problem. We have an
Yes,
energy problem, right?
yes.
And when you start competing with the energy grid for resource with car plants
Yep,
and, the bike shop down the street and whatnot, and it starts increasing the cost of everything because that's a primary input for, I don't care what business you're in. You got to have the lights on, like you got to have electricity. So we're in
yep,
a moment now where we've never seen a convergence of all of these different elements happening simultaneously.
right.
And then you add on top of that a macroeconomic and a political environment that is, let's just say, its hallmark is uncertainty. That's probably the kindest word we could apply to it, right?
Well, it's disruption and change.
Yes. Writ large.
Well, yeah, fundamentally, like, across the board, right, the environment is about disruption and change. And so, how do you not survive in disruption and change, but how do you thrive in disruption and change? And you can't thrive, let alone survive, if you just put your head in the sand. Well, we
That
just
is
need
not
to
a strategy.
buckle down.
That means we're going to keep doing the same stuff we did yesterday, only with more determination.
Right, I'm gonna dig my heels in, right? Brother, I gotta tell you just signed your death warrant, right? And so, and some of this is limited thinking, it's closed-mindedness, right? These are kind of the symptoms of executive debt, right? That we like to talk about. But but more importantly, that cascades to culture, right? And, like, that type of thinking, what it actually does is it perpetuates fear, uncertainty, and doubt within the employee population.
Yeah.
And then that extends into your customer base because you're not communicating, because you're not leading, you're not leaning in. So when we survey the customers, when we talk to customers and do market research and we engage the market, inquiring minds want to know. The market wants to know, like, hey, what's your opinion on this? What are you guys doing about that? How are you as a service provider or a product company or a leader in the industry as my vendor? What are you guys doing about this? If you don't have opinions, if you don't have vision, if you're not ahead of that in the market, like, you will be displaced because the market looks for leadership. So, like, leaning into this whole kind of negative, kind of destructive, kind of polarizing mindset, right? And like spending time or spending resource on that versus innovation versus change versus growth versus what does my organization look like 12 months from now and 24 months from now? What do our products look like? What does my business model look like? What's our capital look like? Like, really spending time focused on growth and focused on innovation and focused on the negative. I think that's a highly destructive thing to do, and that actually perpetuates value destruction, not value creation. And so like us as leaders, we need to be we need to be running towards the fire, right? Because like you and I always talk about, there's 3 seasons in life. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO, doesn't matter if you're an employee, right? You have the season where you're standing still, you have the season where you're running away from something, and then you have the season where you're running to something. And only that last season means that you're going to grow personally and professionally, and your business is going to grow. So if your business is like standing still, you're dying. If your business is running away from change and innovation, you're
You're already
dying.
dead.
You're
You
dead.
just don't even know it.
You're a zombie company, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of content, right? A lot of
Oh, yeah.
thought process in the market right now around zombie companies. And
There's a
you
lot. I
don't
would say probably 80% of the SaaS companies that are out there are walking dead. They just don't know it yet.
right, right,
Because that magical unicorn solution that they came out with 4, 5, 6 years ago, I can code that in 30 minutes. Me and my buddy
right.
ChatGPT or Codex or GitHub.
Right, right, and business modeling, right? So you look at the disruption of change in terms of business model of Big Five and boutique consultancies, right? Thought leadership, and again, the fascinating thing is, I think there was some interesting like natural resistance to the thought of white collar and high professional, high credentialed jobs were going to go away. I think initially there was a lot of pushback on that. Oh, no, no, no. Like the platforms are going to really be used to automate and to augment. Well, what's fascinating is within the last 60 days, there have been more and more people that have come over to the camp and come over to this thought process that we talked about earlier, where, no, this cognitive separation of being able to take high cognitive function and automate that through platform and AI is here.
It is. And it
And and
and it
so
and it delivers on the promise.
well, yeah, and I'm not saying it's perfect. We are
No.
not humans aren't perfect.
Right.
That's not going to be perfect.
Right.
We all need coaching, we all need oversight, we all need mentorship. Like we all need training, we all need continuous improvement. So there is no perfect utopia, right? But the point is that if you're not planning for that in your business, if you're not trying to think about how do I re-architect my business and like how do I know where I'm at today versus where I need to be in 12 months versus what the possible future could be 24 months from now. If my headspace isn't in that and I'm so caught up in I don't have enough cash flow, I don't have enough capital, I don't have enough customers, I don't have enough. Like if you just can't get your house in order and get your systems in order so you have a set of standards and in terms of activity, right? And systems, like even today on a daily basis, you're gonna be in a washing machine. You're gonna be wrapped around and you're gonna be rolling around in this washing machine called your company. And you're not gonna run your company's gonna run you. And then what you're gonna see is you're gonna see your competition, you're gonna see new entries hit your market that are architected from the ground up to take advantage of these trends and these platforms and the underlying infrastructure that's now being built and architected, right? With national and global data centers and national and global infrastructure that's architected and designed and powered for this next generation, right, of companies and services. And you'll be dead.
Um, it's always been the case that every company has that thing, right? It's a competitor, it's a structural deficiency in their business, it's a goal that they've been trying quarter after quarter after quarter to get to. There's always something, that thorn in your side, right? And it's usually aligned to either what market you play in or the type of business that you have or whatever. But today, everybody has a common thorn. And it's interesting because the thorn, it can hurt you if it's sticking in your side, but if you pull it out and you put a handle on it, it can be a great tool for you as well, right? And that's this AI thing. And I've never experienced a moment in the market where every founder, every leader is confronted with the exact same potential danger and opportunity.
Hmm.
And depending how they approach that, just cognitively, do I see it as an opportunity? Do I see it as a threat? Do I not know? That's going to determine many times how they approach it, right? won't determine the outcome, but it'll definitely approach how it'll influence how they approach the problem of it. But what do you say to a founder who's like, I don't even know what to think about this. I know it could be transformational. I know it could be the end of my business. How do I think about this? Well, how do I, as a founder who has no knowledge of this technology, I don't know what this technology can do. I don't know how it works. It's truly a black box. How do I approach that as a leader? What do I do?
Well, my hope, if that's the situation you find yourself in, that you at least have other CEOs and other people in your network or a peer group that you could plug into and start asking those types of questions of. And again, this is why, in my opinion, association and mentorship and coaching is so important at all levels, right? Because you're, as a business owner and as a CEO, the current situation you're in was caused by the way that you think,
That's a controversial statement, my friend.
right? It is. Like
So
if
you're
you
saying
don't,
mindset actually determines outcomes?
the way that you think, right, and your core behavior and the decisions that you make, right, generate the life that you have. And so if you want to change your life, change the way that you think and change the way that you behave and change your habits. And so, right, if you truly don't believe in the victim mentality, and if you truly believe that we all have choices, right? It's our God-given right, right, for you know, freedom of choice and expression, and we all have the same ability to make decisions, regardless of our political, social, right, background, religious background, upbringing. We all have choices, and we all can control how we think and how we act and how we behave. And so at the end of the day, my recommendation would be, if you don't have people in your network that you can go to, that you can get advice from, if you don't have mentors, if you don't have people around you, then find those people. Then reach out, right? And get plugged into a peer group, read, do some research. And again, I fully understand the thought process of, we're behind or we're struggling
Right.
or we
It's like,
have
Mark, I got to run a company, man. I don't have time
we
to
got
read.
cash flow issues, man. Like I gotta focus. Been there, done that. But the lesson is whatever you're investing time in that's non-productive right now, that you're using to escape or entertain yourself, reclaim some of that time and think about your future. And because again, as the CEO or as the owner, the buck stops with you. Your company will only grow as fast as you grow, period. And so, the hypergrowth CEOs that you and I know, right? The people that are Inc. 500, Inc. 5000, guess what they do? They grow, man.
Yeah, they're
They're on
constantly
personal
improving.
development journeys, right?
Yeah.
Professional development journeys. They have coaches, like they're leaning into that. They've
And
cleared the debt.
they vote with their time and with their money for those things
That's right.
because they understand it actually moves the needle.
It's a force multiplier in your life.
Yeah. I mean, it's the difference between committing to a workout regimen and getting a $10 a month membership at the local gym and going maybe 2 days a week
Right.
versus spending $500 a month on a personal coach or personal trainer.
Yep. And then
You're
doing
spending that
what that
$500, you will show up at the frickin' gym.
right. And then doing what that person tells you to do.
Yes.
Right? It's right. It's one thing to be coached. It's another thing to be coachable, right? Because the coachable part of that is I actually apply, right? With intentionality, what I was told to do, not just, oh yeah, hey, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll get around to that someday.
Well, that's why I think, CEOs that we know who are really successful are also continuously crazy busy. They don't have 5 minutes in their schedule, but they find the time for the stuff that matters, that moves the needle. And that stuff's non-negotiable for them.
Right, right. And they're investing in people, right? Those leaders are oftentimes the biggest givers in terms of their willingness and desire to impact people, to impact their team.
Because many times somebody has done that for them and they feel an obligation to pay it forward.
Right.
They're like, hey, I want to help somebody like so-and-so helped me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You and I have both lived that. We've had those
Man,
experiences. We've both had a lot of people sew into us.
so blessed.
Right. And so we do, in a very intentional way, pay it back. And so, I would say as a CEO or a founder, lean into that, lean into peer groups, educate yourself, reclaim some time. My reflection, um, from 20 years ago when, I was CEO of the Rob Group was I, I found things to keep myself busy. I mean, even though I was, a management consultant, I was on the road 70% of the time. But I'd find things to consume myself, to keep myself busy, to entertain myself, right? And because I deserved it, right?
Right.
Because I worked so hard. But the reality was I wasn't focused on the right things, and I could have easily had reclaimed a lot of that time to grow myself and to move my businesses forward. But and again, this is kind of heavy stuff, but there's there's a point in time as a leader where you need to continue to sacrifice even if you think that you've sacrificed enough.
I would argue that that's problematic in and of itself. If you think you've sacrificed enough, that's something you need to
Unpack.
ponder a little bit longer. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely unpack. Unpack that. Like put a pin in that. I need to sit with that a while.
Why do I feel that way? Because the reality is, you and I both know, you're never done,
That's
right?
right.
Especially if you are inclined towards servant leadership or you really just care about your people and stuff like that. Just like with our families, right? I mean, is there a limit to how much I'll sacrifice for my wife or my kids? No, of course not, because that's just goes with the territory, right? And I would argue that being a owner of a business or senior leader of a business where you have literally the welfare of other people's families on your shoulders, you need to take that to heart because man, one bad day as a leader or a founder can wreak havoc on other people's lives.
And and to your point, I think that CEOs and founders that have been a CEO and founder for any length of time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you get tired.
Sure. You're just
Right,
human.
just like as, head of household or whatever, you're
Sure.
carrying the weight,
Yeah. Mama needs a
and
break once in a while. So does daddy.
yeah, and you get tired, so then the question is, so what standards do you have in place in your life as a CEO and executive? What standards do you have and what systems do you have in place in your life to help you recharge? What do you do? Not to run away from your problems, but to truly recharge. Do you meditate? Do you have a set of standards every day? Like what is your system? What are your standards every day? Do you read? Do you do affirmations? Right? Do you meditate? Do you pray? Like, do you surround yourself with positive input? Like, what are you doing to recharge yourself and to defend and protect your mind and your heart every day? Because if you're not doing that, those are that you have in your system, in your leadership, in your personal leadership, your professional leadership, that will manifest bigger problems in your life and in your company. Because again, I'll go back to the comment I made earlier is your company will only grow as fast as you grow. And you can hire other talented people. Oh, I'm going to surround myself with all these great talented people. Talented people will not stay around you if you do not grow. They'll stay for a while, okay? But if they don't see you're growing and they're outpacing your growth, they will leave you. Why? Because they're not married to you, right? I mean, this is kind of like life lesson stuff, but
It is.
you know, you you need to demonstrate intentionality in terms of your development and your personal and professional development, and you need to build a culture within your organization around that, and then you need to lead from the front. Because if the employees witness you not doing that, just like the customer example I gave earlier, they're going to be like, this person doesn't have a vision. This person doesn't have a mission. I don't even know why I show up to work here. And then all these changes in the market occur, and you look behind you and there's nobody there, and you're like, what happened to my company? Well, what happened to the company was you weren't leading, you weren't evolving, you weren't vision casting, like you weren't doing any of these things that the employees and the customers expect you to do as a leader. So therefore, you got replaced by another company or another set of leaders that actually do these things. And so like this whole rate of change and how quick, right? We're seeing this pick up steam and the velocity around this is one of the reasons why you and I wanted to talk about this because I think you and I share in the belief that if you're not thinking this way now, and if you're not planning, and if you're not trying to get ahead of this, and if you're not at least having conversations with people about this, please, right? We're sending the flags up. We're sending the flares up right now. You
Mhm.
must start doing this. And again, it's not just us, right, pontificating about a potential
Right.
future. It's dozens and dozens of industry experts from all walks of life, all different industries, finance, stock market, investment, insurance, manufacturing, right? State, local government, federal government, like all of these leaders are now coming forward and saying what we said. The rate of change is something more significant than we ever thought it would be.
Yeah.
And we all have to get our arms around this or try to prepare for the change. And so that's why you're seeing the shift that we saw in terms of the monetary markets, right? That's why you're starting to see these fundamental shifts in terms of employment. One of the experts that I was listening to the other day speculated that you're going to see 5% GDP growth with 5% unemployment. Unheard of. It's never happened.
Right.
It will happen. It's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
see GDP growth, right, move up, and you're gonna see unemployment move up.
Well, because for the first time, outcomes of our productive activities increasingly don't depend on a human being doing a task or doing a job.
That's that's the tectonic shift. That's
And
that's convergence of those 3 things
yeah.
that we were talking about. And this is truly where I think the emotional and psychological and mental disconnect is. I think that those of us that build businesses and lead businesses and we understand how GDP is calculated, right? The gross domestic product or the gross output of the population now not going to be solely tied to the worker.
Right. Because it's how much they take the number of employees that are active in the country, they take your tax returns, your income, and they multiply the two together, and that's GDP. And then there's some other stuff in there, right? The
Right.
exports and things like that. But that unit of production, the
Yep.
person and how much we earn, that's not going to be a reliable measure anymore because more
Right.
and more of these tasks, the output of our economy, are going to be done by, let's just call them systems and not people.
Right. It's a really interesting situation that I think the workers in the future and the citizens globally are going to find themselves in because what's scary is it's a very Atlas shrugged like situation that I think people are going to find themselves in, which is if you're not a creator or if you cannot produce, then you have a destruction of value. You're
You're
not the
just a drag on the
value,
system. You're a drag
right?
on the system at that point because you're not a productive unit anymore.
Very fascinating thought process.
Terrifying on one level, honestly.
Oh, no, totally, right? Because it's dystopian and right, it's
I don't
Twilight.
think Ayn Rand would be like, "Oh, this is great."
Well
She would be like,
well
"No, this is bad."
well, it's yeah, it's like the Twilight Zone, right? It's you and I grew up watching the Twilight Zone, right? But it's like that one Twilight Zone episode, where people are being judged if they're obsolete, right? Remember that? "You're obsolete!" Yeah, I mean, literally, that's where we're at. So, sometimes art imitates life, and sometimes life imitates art.
Well, and that's
But
why I've been trying to have conversations with people our age and older and encouraging them that if you're still in the workforce, you cannot ignore what's happening right now.
yep.
You will not be employed a year from now if you ignore what's happening. And you need to set yourself up for success. And the only way you're going to do that is to kind of get over yourself and figure out what does this new reality we find ourselves in mean for me personally. You have to take responsibility and figure it out.
Exactly, because nothing that they teach in school will prepare you for this, and no certification and no degree will prepare you for this. I was on a call with some private equity gentlemen recently, and they were talking about what are you seeing in the MSP, MSSP, kind of SaaS, VAR markets, just in terms of business models and changes and disruption with
Mm-hmm.
and so, when you look at like Meriplex and New Charter, and you look at Riverside Group, and you look at some of the other big PE firms that are consolidating the MSP, VAR, MSSP industry, and you look at those assets that they've bought. The majority of those assets are 5 to 15 to 20 years old. The median is like 15 years old. Okay, old business models, technical debt, operational debt, financial architecture that's old, organizational designs that are old. right? You can probably streamlined and kind of cleaned up, right? But the reality is there's still an older business model, older business architecture. Okay. So today and in the next 12 to 24 months, the question was, well, what are those organizations going to be looking for, right? And how should organizations be thinking about their organizational design? Well, it's for the most part heavy automation of level 1, level 2 base operational functionality, right? So just kind of taking a big step back. If you're a SaaS company, if you're a VAR, if you're an MSP, if you're an MSSP, or if you're any other type of business, going back to how we started the conversation, you're not first thinking, what does 2.0 of my business look like? And if you're not spending time architecting and designing that or working with people to do that, you're a zombie company. Those organizations are looking to invest in and buy, okay, organizations that are AI architected, that are heavily automated, but use high-end human intelligence to trust and verify, right, and to tune those operating systems. So think about this from a book value and a value creation perspective. You own a company and you're trying to maximize your book value so you can maximize your exit. If you're hanging on to your old business model and your old organizational design, you will be literally destroying book value. You will be going through a value destruction process if you attempt to hold on to that business model. Same
Yeah.
thing with sales and marketing and the revenue generating side of the business, right? Your COGS, every aspect of your business, every ratio and metric inside of your business, right? From COGS to operating to EBITDA, it's all going to be looked at through a different lens in terms of book value, in terms of multiple. So this is why this conversation is really important to CEO and founders is if you want to maximize your book value and your exit and maximize your access to capital, even if you're not going to sell, how do you think banks and the financial industry is going to be comparing and analyzing your value and how much capital they should be investing or giving you access to if you have a legacy old school business model and they're looking at 50 to 100 other companies that have such a completely different operating model and EBITDA structure, who do you think is going to get the money?
It's interesting, Mark, because there's only been a few moments where your technology readiness and your technology commitment and your organizational design and all of that play into decisions about capital financing and or acquisitions and exits. This is one where usually it takes 10, 12, 15 years for companies, private equity VCs, banks especially, to come along and go, you know what, we should be checking to make sure they're doing this. Like, for example, if you go to a bank today and you're a $10 million company and you're having a conversation with the banker and they find out that you don't have an automated accounting system, that you're doing it on an old ledger book, I don't care how strong your business is, they're not going to write a check to you because you don't have the table stakes basics in place to protect their investment in you, right? Because let's just say you're doing that ledger book thing and you got your Aunt Judy who's been doing it for your company for 30 years. Well, if Aunt Judy gets sick, God forbid, or retires, you're not going to be able to hire somebody in that's going to be able to make sense of her ledger book. You're going to hire somebody in who knows how to do QuickBooks or NetSuite or something like that, right? We're at that moment now with AI, and I'll just say technology space writ large, where if you're not doing certain things like automating base level functions in your organization that used to take people, but now you can do with software, you're not going to have any access to capital. You're not even going to get a second look or a term sheet from anybody and this has happened faster now than it's ever happened before. The VCPE community, they're way out in front on this because they're the
Yeah.
ones writing checks to fund these new technologies. So they're looking around going, oh, wait a minute, you're a traditional SaaS company, but you don't have an AI play yet? I'm not going to
You're
write you
out.
a check. You're out of here. You're done.
Yeah.
You're not
You're
even
dead.
relevant anymore, right?
Yep.
Or you're a new founder and your story doesn't include a AI first storyline. I don't care what you're building. You're not going to get anybody to write a check to you, right? Maybe your aunt will, but no institutional investor is going to invest in you. So we're at a weird place now where, and again, you look at somebody who's a founder who's had their company for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. They've never seen this before. So they don't have a playbook for this. And they're going to continue, like you said before, to operate the way they've always operated. They're just going to keep trying harder to get people to invest or open up capital for them. And in the meantime, not everybody, a portion of the market is driving right past them. And then unfortunately, when this all plays out, it's the ultimate game of musical chairs, where 80 to 90% of the companies that exist right now and are doing business the way they've always done it aren't going to be here in 5 years. They will be gone, because this technology can do way more than we've ever seen before. And we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the use cases and whatnot. And my fear, my concern, and the thing I don't have an answer for, is what the hell are we going to do with all these people? What are we going to do with all these workers that are displaced by the new world we find ourselves in?
Well, yeah. So to your point, I think that would be another incredible conversation, because
It will.
I have.
But it's an important thing to think about right now in the context of the conversation we're having, which is, if you're a leader, what are the things you need to be thinking about today? And one of those things is, what am I going to do with my people?
Right. What am I going to do with my people? What are my kids going to do? Right. If you have teens or young children, or if you have 20 somethings, what are they going to do? And that was the whole thing in the beginning, where, hey, what's happening at home? Like, what's happening with your family? Like, do you have distractions there? And many of us do. Many of us have 20-something-year-olds, or they're either entering the workforce, or they've been in the workforce, or they should be entering this prime earning years in the workforce. And here's what we know. Like, if you just go back and you look at history and what happened, after the steam engine and part of the Industrial Revolution, and in England and in the UK, you had 50 years of loss. You had 50 years of displacement. So, because the technology hit, and then manufacturing and factories were developed, and new jobs were created, but some of the old, blacksmith, locksmith, some of the trades, a lot of the trades were either transitioning, or they went away fundamentally. And so you had decades of people that were displaced, and while the GDP grew, the unemployment grew. And so, like, the middle class became the lower class, because they were gutted, their trades were destroyed, and they couldn't retool. And this was part of the beginning of higher education, in that big movement, that we saw in the US as well. But the reality is this isn't happening over 50 years. This will happen in 5. And so you're not going to have multiple generations of people, like born into that type of environment, like born during the Great Recession, or the Great Depression, and then come through that and then come out the other side. It's no, this is going to hit like a meteor, and it's going to blow up industries and markets, because it's already starting. You already see this happening. And so what are people going to do? So this is where I went back. I was saying, you can't lean into the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You can't let yourself get trapped into this mindset of doom and gloom and negativity. And you have to rise above that. Like, for the sake of yourself, your business, and your family, and your employees, and your customers, you got to pull yourself out of that mindset. And you've got to have systems and standards in place. Because what do we know? You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems and standards and your preparation.
That's right.
Right? That's success principle. And so, that's what we need to do. So we as leaders need to lean into change, lean into innovation, rally around each other, and start planning for 2.0. What does 2.0 look like? And there's, the good news is with COVID, like we said, if there was, a silver lining out of that, it's those of us that were in organizations, or those of us that were consulting to organizations at that time, helping them to retool, helping them to evolve, to change. Like, we know what this playbook looks like. The good news is, even though we're the gray hairs now, in the market, we've lived through wars. We've lived through September 11th. We've lived through Desert Storm. We've lived through, the collapse of '88. We've lived through the Great Recession. right? We've lived through COVID. We know what we should be doing. We know what we need to do. So we have that strength, we have that resilience, and we have that confidence.
Well, even if we don't know what to do, we know that we'll figure it out, right?
Absolutely.
We know we'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
That's why I know you and I are in our team can walk into any company and it doesn't matter what we find on the ground. We can pattern match quickly because we've seen, I don't want to say we've seen it all before. That's braggy, but we've seen a lot. And
Yeah.
I can very quickly go, yeah, that, and that. We need to fix those three things right away. All
Yeah.
this other stuff over here will get better if we fix these three things.
Yeah. 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 And you know what? Also, I think, and this is a key, this is really key. We have failed, right?
Honestly, more times than I've succeeded.
Well, that's the secret, right? The secret to being successful is that you're going to fail oftentimes more times than you succeed. And you learn through failure, right? And again, another Maxwell plug, but his book Failing Forward is a really great example of how to reframe failure. And I've had partners in the past that I've owned businesses with whose mindset was failure is not an option. And so I understand the heart, right? And like
Sure.
why you would want to communicate that, like,
That looks great on a coffee mug. It does.
well,
Let's be
right,
honest.
but no. The reality is you fail. You will fail often. You fail all the time. I fail every day, right? But again, we talked about atomic habits earlier, right? But I am committed to attempting to be a better version of myself, just incrementally a little bit every day. And I invest time in doing that. And by the way, I build teams. When I build teams, that's what I sow into them. Don't try to make massive improvements, right? Like don't try to leapfrog in terms of your small incremental improvements every day. Consistency and persistency is the key. Massive leaps are not sustainable.
And I would argue that that slow, steady pace of change makes you almost immune to massive shifts that
Right.
happen to you or around you.
Yep.
Because no matter what, I'm moving forward a little bit every single day. Even though there's these blockers around me and these distractions and whatnot, I'm disciplined enough and I'm committed enough to the process of improvement that I'm going to do this little bit every day, no matter what. And, it's just like working out, right? It's like, no matter how I feel, I know I've got to go downstairs into my gym or go for my walk in the woods and do my thing every day because I know that even though I feel like crap right now and I definitely don't want to do it, when I'm done, I'm going to feel better. One, because I got to work out in and that makes you feel better, but I'm going to have the emotional and psychological satisfaction of going, I did it. I didn't, wimp out today. I went and did it even though I didn't want to. And that builds character, that builds consistency. And there's no replacement for that. You can't buy that. You can't get that from a book. I mean, you can get the idea of it from a book, obviously, but you've got to do it. You have to personally commit and only you can do it.
Right. And to your point, I had a mentor tell me years and years ago in my 20s that thinking about your business is not building your business. And that really sat with me. And for people that are introverted, like that really sits with introverts when you say that, because oftentimes they're in their own head, right? You spend a lot of time in your head.
I've got a very comfortable setup in my brain.
Exactly.
Big comfy
Yeah.
chairs,
Big
coffee maker. It's awesome.
couches.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, yeah.
Mood
Big cup
lighting.
of Joe. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, but I think that the point is that even any type of action towards progress is better than non-action, right? Just moving forward, to your point, even in small, consistent, and repeatable ways, right? That will help you to get comfortable with change. It will help you with mastering organizational change management. Just making tweaks and changes consistently, continuous improvement, right? And so it's, one of the things that we used to talk about like years ago when we were talking about cybersecurity and the tsunami attacks and, right,
Yeah.
it's the regulatory compliance, the rate of change in regulatory compliance and how it's unsustainable and people just can't get their arms around this. So one of the things that, we would present about and talk about is organizations that will be successful are the ones that master change. The ones that get comfortable or build a culture where they're comfortable being uncomfortable, where they're comfortable with change, you'll win. You will win in every industry. right? Because it's the organizations that are not used to being uncomfortable. It's the organizations and the employees and the leaders that are not used to change are gonna be the ones that are zombies, and they're gonna be the ones that hit the wall. So continuous change, even incrementally, right, is a good thing, right? Just to kind of kind of wrap it up. Focus on the future, be intentional, carve out some time, reclaim some time, start working on the future, start building your systems. If you don't have standards and systems in place, these are principles of success, right? For yourself and for your team. Selfishly, you want to do this for yourself because, again, if you're not growing, your business isn't growing. But then you want to duplicate that within your team. So you want to be able to get your team and your leaders to have a core set of standards in terms of personal development, professional development, so they're moving along. If you truly care about your employees, you will not leave them behind with this. You will get them on the same personal development and the same professional development path and system that you're on. And you will promote that, right? You will reinforce that and you will create a safe space for people to participate in that. Because when you do that, year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when all of these massive changes, right, begin to hit the market, you will have the cream of the crop in terms of employees, right? And they will remember that you invested in them. And by the
That
way,
is
your
very true.
customers, right, your customers will see a difference. You want to talk about something that starts as soft differentiation that turns into a massive competitive differentiator? In 3 to 5 years, when we talked about this cognitive capability being decoupled, right? And you and I have talked about this in the past. I project the organizations that have the highest EQ, emotional intelligence, the highest ability to build rapport, the highest and most effective ability to communicate verbally, visually, face to face, over email, over phone, and the organizations that are the most trustworthy because they trusted but verified and then they delivered, they will be so different than every other organization, and those people, those employees, and those leaders will be so different than what I think will be a more watered down, automated version of service and customer experience, that you just built a huge moat and competitive differentiation for your company, but you got to start now,
Well,
right?
I
That,
agree
like,
with you, Mark. I mean,
if you don't have it in place, you got to start now.
as you know, I've been preaching for years that culture is the one aspect of your company that your competitors can't touch, because culture, as much as we try to intentionally build culture, it really is mostly happenstance. It's a function of the people that you hire, the culture that you've kind of created or promoted and all that. But it really has to do with the mix, that unique mix of ingredients, the people that you get, right?
Yep.
And what, in my experience, the companies that pay the most attention to culture and really craft it, like protect it and hire for culture fit almost more than anything, they're the
Mhm.
ones that survive the bad stuff, because at the end of the day, it's about the resilience, creativity, and commitment of the people on your team that will get you through whatever the thing is, whether it's a financial collapse, whether it's a new competitor, whether it's, you missed your Series C funding and now you got to figure out how to bootstrap this thing to the next level. Your people are the ones that are going to show up and make it happen for you.
Right.
And to your point, unless you're investing in them and you're setting an excellent example of how you incrementally improve and are a lifelong learner, and you create opportunities and incentives for people to follow through on that, if you're doing that, you're in a much better position for whatever the market's going to throw at us in the next period of time. But
And
if you're not doing those things, you've created a structural deficiency at the core of your company that will make everything harder and that will more likely put you in the ditch rather than push you forward.
right. And if you ever expect to create brand ambassadors and advocates out of your customer base, like, they have to see that. That's the
Agreed.
experience. So your culture and your commitment and your focus on continuous improvement and focus on outcomes and adding value, and that just has to be core. And when that comes through, because your people believe it and they live it, and they live it with the customers become ambassadors. And right, and there's no magic to this. This is very intentional, right? And so this is where, like, you and I have been educating oftentimes the markets for years around sales and marketing is not magic.
Mostly science.
It's grounded in science. There is heavy soft skill
Yes. A little artistry
associate
to it.
right, there's these are performance roles. This is a performance art, right? So that ability to connect, that ability to communicate, that ability to influence, that ability to empathize, right? Like those are all soft skills. And so, but that is very intentional, right? You hire, you define it, you benchmark it, you hire to it, you build it,
Train.
you train to it, you infuse, right? So you're constantly looking to create this diverse mix, right, of characters and people and personalities, right?
Why don't we do that with our accounting departments or our CS teams or in our engineering teams especially? Why aren't we doing that with our engineering teams?
Right. Well, again, I think what you're going to find is just going back to some of the movement, some of the things that we talked about, this cognitive consciousness that is now being decoupled, like some of the things that you just talked about are being programmed within agentic. So, right, the warning is if you are an engineer, if you're an accountant, if you're an attorney, you're legal counsel, right? If you're in a non-market or non-customer facing or non-sales and non-marketing role, do yourself a favor. And even if you're leading those organizations, lean into emotional intelligence, lean into soft skills, lean into interpersonal skills, develop yourself in these areas because the programming is so advanced and this cognitive ability is now accelerating so fast that those are some of the functionalities and features that will be programmed into agentic, and that agentic will be creating that experience with the end customers, and you will be disintermediated. And that's the biggest reason why I keep articulating and falling back to you need to be investing in developing these areas and these skills in your life, not just because they help you with all of the relationships in your life, right? Marriage, right? Family, whatever, but in your relationship, in your own well-being, but also because the future, if you will want to be a high income earner in the future or a leader in the future, these will be table stakes.
Yes.
You must have these capabilities. And so if you think about founders that are like, hey, I'm going to build my company, I'm going to sell my company in the next couple of years, that's great, but you still have to think about, okay, you sold your company for 10 million, for 20 million, for 5 million, whatever. So now what are you going to go do? So because any type of corporate role, advisory role, board work that you do, any type of missionary work that you might want to do, right? Like anything like that, oh, I want to give back to the community. Okay, you still need these skills,
You do.
right? You still need this capability in your life to positively impact others.
Well, I think that's a great place to kind of pause because there's a lot more to talk about on these topics. And I have some ideas about where we might like to go next. But as always, man, I just really appreciate your perspective on this stuff. You and I could sit here with a bottle of Crown and talk about this stuff for hours, man.
Amen. Amen. Appreciate
Well,
you.
hey,